Hey, what's happening everyone? In this video we're going to be talking about the two main differences between Lightroom and Photoshop, what I use these programs for and where I think you should focus your attention on learning. Right, Lightroom or Photoshop, which one do you pick? They both have pros and cons, and they both have very different uses in my eyes. Something that I wish I did earlier on was focus more attention on Photoshop. So what's Lightroom used for? For me personally, I use it for batch editing and editing a large quantity of files really quickly. It can be a great cataloging system to go through and number and rank your files, but I use a different program for that, Photo Mechanic, which I think is a little bit faster as well. But Lightroom, like I said, it is great for batch editing. You can work through a lot of files really fast, and the quality of the work that you can put out of that is really nice as well. So Lightroom's based off of Camera Raw Editor, and it basically has all the same features that you're going to find in Camera Raw Editor. It's just designed for like really fast workflow, and in my eyes not really finesse fine art work. You can get amazing results in there, but we're going to talk about some limitations, especially when we start talking about Photoshop. The cons that I find working in Lightroom are you're working in a destructive manner. You're applying all the changes that you make directly to the file. This is called destructive editing, and it's something that you can't really go back and remove, where in Photoshop you're doing all of your edit in layers sequentially over the top of the original file, and if you don't like something you can just remove it. So another con in Lightroom is the luminosity blending modes. So luminosity blending is used to mask out certain parts of the image based on their lumen. In Photoshop, the way you can use that using blend if mode is just insane how detailed you can get. Lightroom does have it, but it is super limited in the way that you can use it. My comparison for the two programs is Lightroom's a bit more like a hammer, whereas Photoshop's more like a paintbrush. So to talk about Photoshop, what is Photoshop good for? For me personally, I use Photoshop for every single image that I'm going to use to print. I would never print an image off Lightroom, based on the fact that you cannot finesse the detail in the way that you can in Photoshop. That's just my workflow, and that's something that I've developed over time. It's something that I would strongly recommend that you do as well. Once you learn the kind of finer art details of Photoshop and what you can do with brushes and luminosity blending modes, it sounds really complicated to learn, but I promise you it's super simple, and we're going to cover that in upcoming videos. But the amount of detail that you can preserve, the amount of more information in the files that you can work with, and it's like you're painting things with a fine brush rather than just smashing them with a hammer. As soon as you grab that clarity slider and you start dropping that in Lightroom, you're affecting the entire image, and it's really hard to build a composition if you're using sliders to affect an entire image. Instead, if you're using curves, layers and brushes to do your dodging and burning, you can be really selective in what you want to target. You can build a composition by leading the viewer's eyes to the subject. There's so many more things that you can do. While Lightroom does have brushes and you can use them, you'll see in upcoming videos the difference between using a Lightroom brush and a Photoshop brush when you start using luminosity blending modes. The difference between the two brushes is night and day. One of them is super gentle and the other one is quite violent. So my take on editing from the very start has always been learn the hardest one, and then everything else under that will be easier. So I think if you focus your attention on learning Photoshop to start with, Lightroom will be very intuitive and very easy to pick up. Like I said, it is great for those batch editings. If you need to knock out 50 or 100 images, you can sync your edits across one, batch your exposures and go from there. But anything you're going to be doing for print, anything fine art for clients, Photoshop's the only way to do it. So when I was starting out photography, I got super overwhelmed with having really great creative ideas but not knowing how to execute them, and not understanding that a lot of that execution happens in post-production. Whether it's color correcting, setting the mood with different lighting, relighting images, or masking out certain areas to target things. So I feel like spending the time to learn these programs properly is going to free up your limitations as a creative person to be able to put work out that you're super proud of. It's definitely the one thing that's helped me the most in everything that I've done. Learning Photoshop is the best decision that I ever made as a creator. Understanding these programs and what you can do in them has totally changed the way that I view taking images as well. It's totally changed the way that I approach every single aspect of photography, and it's by far the best decision I've ever made to just spend the time, dedicate what's needed, and learn these programs. I guarantee you it will pay off. It is frustrating to start with, but just stick with it. It's worth it.